Governor Susana Martinez had until March 12th to sign or veto legislation, including the budget. Members of both parties lauded that budget as a bipartisan effort in our last session, but the governor struck $27 million from the final bill and also vetoed provisions to give the legislature more oversight over state agencies. We're going to talk about that one. That is rankling some lawmakers, but she also approved higher salaries for New Mexico teachers, new teachers that is, and for schools, and for more spending for some early childhood programs. So joining us to talk about this and other news of the week is line regular attorney Sophie Martin. She's back. Also returning to the line table, we have Laura Sanchez, CEO of the New Mexico Green Chamber of Commerce and an attorney. And another line regular is here. He is Tom Garrity of the Garrity Group. Good to have him back. And rounding out, our old friend, James Monteleone, reporter with the Albuquerque Journal. Jim, you go by Jim. I say James, your byline. That's okay. You covered some of the session and your sense of where the governor was coming from on some of her veto decisions in the overall. We'll get to some of the specifics, but in the overall, any great surprises there for you?
Surprises, maybe a stretch. Certainly the one that stood out the most was the veto of the judicial pay. Mm-hmm. Our judges, our district court judges, rank the lowest in the country. Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, they're earning more than $100,000, but these are prominent attorneys that otherwise could be earning significantly more than that. Mm-hmm. And it was proposed by the legislature to give them a 5% pay raise, mm-hmm. in addition to the 3% that all state employees were getting. Mm-hmm. And so that combined to 8%. And the governor basically just said, that's too much for these people that are earning more than $100,000. When there's teachers, there's other people not getting enough. Mm-hmm. There certainly was some pressure for her to sign that, and she scratched the whole thing out. Mm-hmm. I think that maybe stands out as the most significant veto that a lot of people were watching, just unsure which way she was going to go.
Right. Laura, let me pick up on that with the pay thing. That was interesting to me because we had, as we tape here on Thursday afternoon, Attorney General Gary King had a very strongly worded statement out earlier this morning saying some of these vetoes were targeted right at his office. It affected everyone from his mailroom up to senior attorneys. And I'm paraphrasing, certainly, he had no problem with the upper people not getting a raise, as Jim mentioned, but he had a real problem for the lower folks who were not hired under him. They had been there for quite a long time. Does he have a legitimate gripe here on that, in your view?
Absolutely. I think anybody that works in the state government and has been there for a while has seen some real problems in terms of pay, and that has affected morale. It's affecting services. And I think, his argument is that it was a targeted and political
he didn't shade around that. He went right at that and said it was a targeted thing.
And what's interesting is that I think there is something to be said for the fact that he's talking about people who are in the civil service, so people who basically are not political appointees, and they tend to be the least paid across the board in state government, and those that really are affected by morale issues. And having had so many changes to the pension system recently, state employees in general across the board are really suffering from low morale right now. So I think those are legitimate concerns.
Yeah, interesting. Sophie, pick up on that if you would as well. And also the idea that she vetoed, some things that kind of concern the legal business as well in Santa Fe. It's very interesting.
When I look across especially the vetoes within the budget, they seem to be largely, although not exclusively, clustered into the judiciary, the arts, and higher education. That's where we see those big cuts. And the balance of power between the governor and the judiciary has been an ongoing issue. Early on, she took some steps that the Supreme Court had to sort of rein in. There's some early decisions about her appointments that the Supreme Court made. And it feels to me, looking at what was cut, that the cuts are highly political, highly ideological, and specific to this governor. That she, despite the fact that she comes from the legal community, cuts in the budget for funding for public defenders, for the judiciary, for our judges, et cetera. We already have an overburdened judiciary. It takes too long, and the judges themselves say this, it takes too long for people to make their way through the system, both on the criminal and the civil side, and that means that justice is delayed for New Mexicans. There was an opportunity to try and create some equity there, and unfortunately it didn't happen.
Yeah. We go with this raises thing, Tom. I mentioned that some teachers got raises. If you can call a new teacher getting a raise, it's just a new entryway, a couple grand more. I'm curious what the upshot is for veteran teachers who did not get a raise. Something about that doesn't sit quite well, I'm sure, with a lot of teacher corps. You've been at it a long time, you're really expecting something. What's the upshot there, do you think?
Well, when you look at the education budget as a whole, that was one of the areas of huge tug of war as far as above the line, below the line. And, of course, those that go through the funding formula were the items that got axed.
Right.
And so, I think that was just the governor clearly sending a message that, hey, I want my way. Right. You might have put my, secretary into limbo, but, still I'm going to get what I'm going to try and get with the legislature. So, education remains one of those key issues that will, befuddle legislators and the governor for years to come.
Sure. But we do have extra money for early childhood, I mentioned as well. That's interesting. She had been kind of quiet about that.
Yeah, early childhood, obviously, getting its initial legs under the Richardson administration and carrying it through. And what I think is interesting about that particular tie, if only because of the Richardson administration, is that this session the governor used the same kind of approaches that the Richardson administration used in its workings with the legislature, as far as relying more upon its, her lieutenants to go and carry the message. Right. And then working on the water legislation specifically, which kind of surprised me a bit. She was talking about, we need $112 million of programs and projects, but ended up only getting 89.
That's right.
And it's how she got to that 89, which was interesting, because it was those same old tactics of bringing legislators up to her office and saying, well, what are you going to be doing and stuff. So it was this one-on-one, hand-to-hand combat. So I thought that was fascinating.
It's interesting. Jim, another thing that's fascinating as well is what got vetoed about legislative oversight of executive machinations. Let's just use that word. I found the quote from the governor kind of interesting, saying, we don't do that. We don't have people looking over our shoulder here. Now, there are good reasons not to have that, and some other good reasons. How do you think that's going to sit, however, with our legislature? They're looking for a little transparency here.
They are. That's been an ongoing conflict between the legislature and the governor's office. This is the classic kind of separations of powers, push and pull. That being said, it's also worth noting that the legislature and the governor's office are not new to poking at each other. This has been happening for 4 years now, right? So I think this is just the evolution of the ongoing conflict.
Yeah.
And I don't think that there's no direct, there's no pathway that this changes the dynamic.
But on that note, though, Laura, it seems to me that, I was interested in that quote from Lucky Varela, who says, look, if we can't get it done that way, we have subpoena power, and we may have to use that to get to where we need to go. Is that a reasonable threat? Is that even a threat?
Well, I think it is a threat. I don't think it gets, it's there. There's the ability to do that, but I don't think it's been used. I think the threat is there for a reason. But I do find it really troubling that, clearly this governor ran on a plank of transparency. That was a big part of the platform and the talking points on the campaign trail. And it will be interesting to see as we're heading into this new election cycle whether that's continued, because now there's 4 years, 3.5 years, whatever, of of actual in office, and I'm not sure that she can point to anything to say, look, I've been as transparent as I can be. I think a lot of people will be able to call her on that.
Yeah,
I think, and this is not necessarily to the defense of the governor or to the legislature either, but transparency is the buzzword of the day and has been now for a couple of years. Everybody goes around saying, we're being transparent, and you're not transparent at all. It has become almost meaningless, I think, as a term within government, because we see, for instance, elected officials just doing their job and then saying, look how transparent I am there, and they really aren't.
Well, I would argue that maybe among elected officials it has become meaningless, but
yes.
I would argue, just in defense of state employees, having been one at one point and having to work on IPRA requests, I do think that people in the agency take those things very seriously, and there is a very clear direction and statute about what they're supposed to do, but it becomes politicized.
We're under a minute. Tommy, would you agree with that? You've had some experience up there as well. Is that what Laura said?
Yeah, transparency is definitely a flag to be waving, if you're an elected official, until the redacted documents come out and people go, oh, hey, what happened to transparency? So, it takes different forms, but it's kind of like, what is pornography? It's different things to different people.
That's right.
And so, it's up to the electorate to decide, what truly is transparency and what isn't.
Transparency Week is coming. This could be very interesting after this decision. Now, coming up, we look at a new series of events focused on the water crisis in the West.